Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer. Back in Duncton, and today we're looking at the schools in Duncton. One of the schools, the early school, was down by St Mary's. Very early school, and I had the luck to go in and have a look at it. Let's just take a quick peek inside the school as it is now and have a look not only at what it's being used for today, but also the space that the children would have been in. As you can see, it is actually now being used as a wood store and a workshop for a carver, and so we can't get to see completely the whole space, but you still get that sense of the size of it. It is quite tiny, really, and children, lucky children, you know, for the first time being educated in a school, in a building, somewhere to go and learn things and have that education. And here it is, behind these upright logs. You can't see it from here, but there would have been a chimney breast, which is on the far side. I believe there are even, or it has been reported, pupils' names carved somewhere on the walls, but we can't see any of that now. And you can see behind me the two arch windows, which, as we've said before, with the Louvre windows, they wouldn't have been there. They probably would have been glass. It would have been glazed. So it's got quite a high roof. So with a fire, I guess, and children in here and a schoolmaster or mistress, it would have at least taken the edge off really cold days and been quite cosy on other days. And I guess if the kids were told to go and chop the wood for the fire, and there was plenty of wood around, that would have kept them warm as well. But yeah, it's nice to be able to actually go inside and have a glimpse. To imagine, if you can, children sitting there at some form of desk and the schoolmaster going through whatever the early church schools wanted to teach them. I'm here outside the Cricketers, the pub. We've looked in the pub and explored the history of the pub and the use of a pub in the community these days in an earlier video that I've made. But what was it like actually going to the newer schools that were here in Duncton? Well, let's have a chat with two people who remember going to the school, and that is John Mays and John Robbins.
So far as I can recall, I went to the school, the Church of England school, in about 1939. That's right. First primary school there, and it's the school, the outside of which looks very similar to what it does today. But there were two, which became three classrooms there, that housed 50 to 60 children. Very primitive sort of school inside in terms of its hardware. No heating as such, just one fire. Very cold in the winter. No illumination, right the way through to 1950, when electricity first came to the village.
So were you using candles and things?
The school was just closed. Oh. In the winter months, we'd have to stop early, sent home, much to our delight, of course, you know. Yeah. So without electricity, and the head teacher at that time, Miss Botting, who's even to this day, I think, is well remembered, isn't she?
Oh, I think she is.
People
yes,
know
yes.
her as being I think the phrase often goes round, firm but fair, and rather Victorian sort of look about her. But she was very fair, made sure everyone got the best education she could get, and she had many opportunities to do that as the war years rolled on.
How many pupils were at the school at any one time?
Well, I think probably something like 55, 60, between 50 and 60, that sort of thing. And
but not in the same class. I mean, you had
no. 3 classes, and so I don't know quite exactly what the distribution would have been, but 3 classrooms, and that was that. The war was just beginning, 39, and certain big changes in the village were taking place. One of the things being that we all had to carry our gas masts to school in square cardboard boxes, and every so often Mr. Tom Upton, who lived right next to the pub here, would come and inspect our gas masks and make sure we were putting them on or could put them on correctly, so on. So that was one of the consequences of it. Much later on, say 44 or something like that, there was a great gathering of armed forces in the 2 big parks, Burton Park and Lavington Park, prior to D-Day, of course. And this, for just about all of us, I think, was the first time we'd seen people other than white-skinned people. Some of them were Afro descent from Canada or North America. And once again, in our little village school in 1939, dear headmistress was giving us all the usual sort of talk that you would expect about the people that we're seeing for the first time in our lives. They were every bit as equal as we were, and the colour of their skin had got nothing to do with it. So we had very, very serious moral sort of talks about all that sort of thing.
Gosh.
Yeah.
When did you go to the school, John?
Well, I was at the old Duncton school from in the early and mid '60s, and one of my earliest recollections, I guess, would be in the winter of '62-63, when, because of the amount of snowfall, the school was quite often closed, which of course suited me very well, as it were.
Imagine with all that snow, did you go tobogganing on the Duncton Hill? Could you go up there?
Yeah, I think probably at that stage I was too small to get that far under my own steam. Yes, but yes, there was certainly a lot of tobogganing went on round and about, and the usual things, snowball fights and making snowmen and that kind of thing. And of course then it was not like it was now, exactly as John had described. The only heat in the school was tortoise stoves.
Tortoise stoves?
Yeah.
What's a tortoise?
Well, they're great big, looks like a cast iron barrel, I suppose, and it has a hatch at the top where you tip the coal in, and another hatch at the bottom where you rake the ash out, and the whole thing gets, if it's done properly, the whole thing gets red hot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Gosh.
So if you're sat near it, you're cooked, and if you're at the back of the room, you're frozen.
Golly.
No, we didn't have one of those. It was just an open grate thing, but I know exactly what you mean, because there was one like it in the church, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was.
Yes.
Which again, that disappeared at about that time. I should think the school one remained there until that school closed.
What about the lessons that you were doing? What sort of subjects were you being taught, and how rigorous were they?
Well, I think there were sort of subjects that you would expect. I mean, there was reading, writing, arithmetic, the traditional 3 R's.
But by rote, like when the parrot fashion.
Very much so. I mean, in the times table, we all sat and chanted that, 2 2s are 4 and 3s, that sort of stuff. But again, the head teacher was very keen to take us out of the classroom, either physically or our interest out of the classroom, in practical things to do with mathematics. On one occasion there had been a surveying team around the school for some reason or other, and they'd left their measuring chain behind. So she commandeered that, didn't declare it for a few days, while we all got used to measuring things with this measuring chain.
Gosh.
So we amended our times table, 12 inches, 1 foot, 3 feet, 1 yard, into the other thing. I don't know if you remember that.
Chains and furlongs.
Well, yes, and before you get to that, 1 yard, 5.5 yards, 1 rod, pole, or perch.
That's it. Yeah.
And 4 rod poles perch is one furlong.
That's right, isn't it?
4 of those is 220, and 8 furlongs, 1 mile. So that was the other little lesson we had to learn. So, very practical approach to these sorts of things. Someone had left this behind, so she immediately adapted it to how we could use it, and so on.
What about, because you're in a rural village, presumably rural crafts and that sort of thing and the way of life would be an important part of school life, was it?
Well, how did it happen for you, John?
Yes, I suppose it was really. I mean, we were often taken out for walks around the countryside, yes. Nature walks and that kind of thing. And the other thing I remember, there were two headmasters there. Well, I was in the time I was at school, and the second one who was there, he'd been on the Burma Railway as a prisoner of war, Mr. Salisbury, and one of the things that he was very enthusiastic about teaching us to do, because he was very keen into music, is we all made bamboo pipes from pieces of bamboo, which were like recorders. And I mean, what the health and safety people now would make of children who were primary school children loose with bradawls and files and hacksaws to cut these up. I don't know, but I've still got the pipes now. I found them in a cupboard when I was about 40, and much to my surprise I could still play it.
Extraordinary.
But we didn't have so much of that, but as far as the rural pursuits were concerned, certainly nature walks. And they were quite considerable nature walks. I mean, early in this series you were up in the Downs, and it was not unusual to have a nature walk from the school at Duncton up Duncton Hill to Bishop's Clump, which is quite something for little tots.
Oh, we've done the same.
Yes,
we did the same in my time,
And I guess back in those days, kids going to school would have walked. They wouldn't have been taken in by their Chelsea tractors.
That's right. That's correct. But the other things that Miss Botting used to do was to insist rather, that the boys and girls were treated much about the same in what they learned. So as far as we were concerned, we had to learn to knit.
Oh, did you?
Oh, yes. And we also had to learn how to cook.
Yes.
And for that we went to Petworth, some place just opposite the post office. I can't remember where it was now, but somewhere up there. So we had to learn to cook. Because I remember the first thing you had to do was how to make a foundation pudding, which I always thought was a dodgy sort of title anyway. But
presumably when you were cooking in 1939, you've got rationing going on, so you
don't know how they managed that, but it was somehow it was done there. Yes.
With powdered egg and all that sort of stuff.
I think it was quite an enlightened approach to education. A simple little village school in the war years. You boys have got to learn how to do this and that and so on, and be self-sufficient as you could be as a child.
Where did you go once you'd finished at that school? Because there's no secondary school here, is there?
No, so I went from there. I mean, there was the 11 plus was in force at that time. I went from here to Midhurst Grammar School.
Right, so that was getting on a bus.
And that was getting on the train.
Oh, on the train.
Because the train ran from Duncton, Petworth railway station actually, but just about within the Duncton parish, to Midhurst, and then walked from the Midhurst railway station down to school every day.
What about you, John?
Much the same, really. I went on from the school here on to Midhurst, to the grammar school, but by the time I went, there was no railway. The railway had been closed to passenger traffic, so I used to have to get a bus into Petworth and then get on another bus into the grammar school.
Gosh.
And then later on there was a dedicated school bus was laid on, which picked up through all the surrounding villages.
So a bit of a palaver to begin with.
Yeah.
Well, it seems that there were plenty of fond memories there, and if you went to any of those schools, I'd love to know what you thought of the place. Do put your comments below, or where any memories actually that you have from your schools that are worth sharing. Would love to know. Anyway, thank you for watching. Don't forget to follow, like and subscribe. Leave that comment, that would be absolutely fantastic. Or become a patron and help me continue to make these videos that I make on landscape, heritage and nature. But until the next time I visit Duncton or wherever I am, thank you so much for watching and goodbye.